The BMW 1 Series has experienced a lot of success in its 20-odd years on sale, and despite being the entry point to the BMW range, it does dictate about quite a lot what this brand does. Now, there's a new generation car which arrives with a fresh new look, as well as some clever interior change, which is aiming to make this car even more successful than its predecessor. We have come to a frankly horrible day in Germany to see what this latest generation of 1 Series is like and whether you should be considering it as your next new car. So if you don't mind, I'm going to get inside and see what it's like.
The look of the new 1 Series has changed quite noticeably to that of the car which came before it. Things have been rounded off and smoothed away. And does it look a whole lot different? Well, it does in person, and certainly the front end of the car bears a striking resemblance to other, well, Kia-made products. It does feel like the front of the 1 Series is taking some key inspiration from the Ceed of old and the Tiger nose grille that you'd find on many Kias. However, around the back there are newly designed lights, and overall this car has grown ever so slightly, but not a whole lot. It's still a good looking car, but I don't think it looks quite as sharp as the car which came before it.
The interior of the new BMW 1 Series has taken a big step up compared to the predecessor, namely through the inclusion of this new widescreen display that we've seen used on other recent BMW models. It's got loads of great features, and most importantly, it's very responsive to your inputs. It's got some new connected features too, which mean that you can actually do things like play games on your smartphone and mirror it on the display ahead, though of course you do have to be doing that when you are stationary. In terms of quality, it's not too bad. Plastics down here, they aren't shiny, which I appreciate. They do feel a little bit thin, but overall the practicality is good. You've got some nice cup holders and plenty of charge points as well. The steering wheel, as we found on other BMWs, is a little bit chunky, but it feels nice to hold, and the buttons themselves are good to use too. I also like the fact that you've got loads of these traditional BMW colours dotted here, there and everywhere, and a neat function are these side aluminium panels too, which actually integrate a warning to tell you if there's a cyclist or a pedestrian to your left-hand side when you're exiting the vehicle. I think that's a really smart feature, and one that I could see being included on a lot of future models, not just from BMW, but from the wider automotive scene too. Overall, I feel like the tech has bumped up quite a lot in the 1 Series, not too much to the detriment of overall usability. In terms of boot space, the 120 says that it has a 300 litre boot, and that means that it's 80 litres down on the previous generation car. Now that seems to be different between that and the M130. That has a 380 litre like you would have found on the previous generation 1 Series, and that matches the A3, but at 300 litres that's significantly lower than the previous car, and that is a failing quite massively actually. But elsewhere the rear seats have good space to them, and the front seats are nicely bolstered and feel comfortable to use too. The BMW 1 Series has always offered a dynamic drive, and even in its switch to front wheel drive for the previous generation car, it still managed to retain some of that sportiness imbued in all of its vehicles. Now for the UK the range has been massively simplified, so now we're only getting the petrol powered 120 and the range topping M130. You might notice that I'm not saying 120i or M130i, and that's because BMW has got rid of the i's. They're solely for its electric vehicles, so you won't find them on petrol versions anymore. So I'm in the 120, the arguably entry-level version of the 1 Series that we'll get in the UK. Now it's powered by a 1.5 litre petrol engine, turbocharged and with mild hybrid assistance, and it produces just shy of 170 brake horsepower, so it's actually quite punchy for an entry-level 1.5 litre engine. And it should be capable of doing 0 to 60 miles an hour in around about 7.6 seconds, so it's on the money in terms of performance and acceleration for this type of car. Now combined you should be able to see around 40 mpg, which again is quite average. I don't think anything's lost in terms of performance or acceleration, and certainly having that mild hybrid assistance does help boost that efficiency ever so slightly. We're in an M Sport Pro version, and of course being an M Sport that gets bigger wheels and it gets redesigned suspension, and as I found today during this very wet test, despite the fact that you're probably seeing some very sunny looking shots of the car moving outside, it's quite firm. This car is relatively firm on these standard suspension, on this M Sport suspension, and on these larger alloy wheels. I'd rather it be a little bit comfier, particularly being a standard hatchback. It's just something that I find most particular to me. You might not find that. You might like a more involving dynamic ride, but I do think that if you want a normal hatchback, you want it to be a little bit comfier and not to knock into all those big bumps in the road. However, I will say that the handling remains quite sweet on this car. It's nicely level going through the bends, and it doesn't feel overpowered through those front wheels. That's something that can often happen with a turbocharged petrol running just through the front wheels. In efficiency mode, it does tend to knock down the gears quite quickly, and you can find yourself just kind of burbling along as you seem to be in a higher gear than you need to be. You can take control via the steering wheel paddles, and if you do so, it's quite pleasant. The engine actually makes a relatively nice noise actually for a 1.5 turbo. It doesn't feel overly sporty, but certainly it's not like a raucous noise in the background that you're going to get a little bit weary of hearing. I've found today that if you are super aggressive with the throttle, it can give the front wheels a bit of an opportunity to skip. But again, it's a very, very wet day, and it's driving all of that power through the front wheels, so give it a little bit of leniency in that area. Visibility isn't that bad. The front pillars are nice and slim, although the rear window is quite narrow, so that is a bit of a negative, but that does come from the overall styling of the 1 Series. However, I've got nice big wing mirrors, and I've got plenty of assistance systems too that do give you an added sense of safety when you are driving, particularly in such horrendous conditions as I am today. The brakes feel nice, they're progressive, they're not too sharp, and I feel like I've got a good amount of control over them. Overall, it feels like a very usable package, and the steering in particular has a nice balance between being weighty enough to make you feel like you're in control of the car, but light enough that actually when you're doing those low-speed driving, it's not too cumbersome. It doesn't make the whole car feel too weighty. I do think that it's a bit of a missed opportunity for BMW not to offer any type of diesel engine with the 1 Series. I know it's a bit of a naughty word these days, but for a lot of people, particularly people who buy or get 1 Series through a business scheme or using it as a company car, the diesel engine still made a load of sense and offered great levels of refinement and efficiency over all different types of driving, but particularly long motorway trips, which is when most business users might be using their car. That isn't going to be the case. We're not going to get a 118D, we're not going to get a 120D, it's just going to be this 120 petrol. And I do think that it would have been an added benefit to the range had there been a diesel available. Naturally, that is just the way of the world at the moment, but yeah, I think it does exist. It's being offered in European markets. It's just not coming to the UK. And I do think that's something that UK buyers might have wanted, particularly from a car like this one. I do find that the screen setup in this 1 Series is one of the least intrusive too. It feels the most natural, of course. I was one of the biggest advocates of the old style of BMW design for its binnacles with the orange displays ahead of you, and I thought that when they switched to this new style of display that it felt like it lost a little bit of BMW-ness. But it is effective and it is nice and clear, and with a head-up display being combined with that, I feel like I've got all of my information that I want ahead of me without being overly distracted. They've cleaned up the display as well in the centre with the infotainment, so that a lot of those shortcut features that you still want when you're on the move are easier to get to when you are actually driving. There's nothing worse than having to delve through a touchscreen when you're driving, because it is distracting. You want those quick functions right there, and that's something that I think you do get in this 1 Series and in most of the current generation of BMW vehicles too. The BMW 1 Series has experienced so much success over the years that bringing a new version to market is always going to pose a challenge, but I do think that BMW has moved the game forward on enough to make things interesting. This latest generation of 1 Series has all the in-car tech that you'd expect from a modern-day BMW, but it hasn't lost sight of what the 1 Series always needed to offer, which was practicality and a premium feel in one relatively compact package. I do think that the ride is a little bit too firm on this M Sport version, and I think there are some slightly dubious materials used inside, but overall this still feels just as well rounded as the 1 Series always did, and it's still well worth checking out if you're in the market for a premium hatchback. Thank you for watching this very wet new car review of the BMW 1 Series. And if you have enjoyed this video, please leave us a like below and let us know in the comments section what you think of this latest 1 Series. And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors YouTube channel, and if you hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification each time we upload a new video.